How's it going, everybody? Dave Meltzer here. Next 2 hours, we're going to be talking pro wrestling. We're going to have Jim Cornette as our special guest with myself and Brian Alvarez. We'll be talking about all of the latest wrestling news. I'm sure we'll be talking about Paul Heyman, who will appear on Raw tonight in some form or fashion. I don't know that he will be an announcer. If he ends up being the announcer by the end of the 2 hours, I think that tells us all we needed to know about last week's big story with Jerry Lawler. If he's not used in that role, then that also tells us a lot about last week's big story with Jerry Lawler. Brian, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
How's the weekend?
It was good. Nothing really happened, but I got a lot of the newsletter done, so I am hoping, and for some reason I just know this won't happen, but I'm hoping nothing big breaks in the next 2 days that would keep me up all night Tuesday. Keep hoping, right?
No such luck.
Okay.
Just for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Unfortunately, Tuesday, yeah. Nah, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to be here Tuesday night, so that makes it real tough. But I got a lot done, too. You know, it is so much easier for me when there's no pay-per-view. It's unbelievable.
Oh, I know.
And now there's going to be so many, like we went from last year with, what ended up being the number? About 30, close to 40 pay-per-views last year. And this year, whatever that number is, it's going to be 20, probably closer to 25. That's going to make a big difference.
And wait till next year. It could be down to like 15.
It won't be that low. But it could be, I don't know, who knows? Who knows? Because there's going to be startups and things like that.
Yeah.
Actually, we have a poll question kind of on that vein. I don't know if the poll results for the weekend, but we'll have them in a couple of minutes. The poll question actually for this weekend. Jim Cornette's going to be up in about a half an hour, which actually I'm very much looking forward to, having watched a whole bunch of Ohio Valley wrestling tapes this weekend to catch up, and part of his shoot interview where I heard all these stories of the early part of Jim Cornette's career. And actually, I knew most of those stories, but very entertaining. And after watching Ohio Valley Wrestling, there's no question in my mind, and it's not going to happen, and obviously the fact that he's on the show today tells you this, Jim Cornette actually would have been the best choice to replace Jerry Lawler, except he didn't want to do it, they didn't want him to do it, and it's not happening. But watching him communicate, I mean, it's very much old Bill Watts style, which is what Jim Ross broke in with. But there's some stuff, and I want to wait till he's on the show. I want to talk to him about, as regards that. But I was really impressed with his ability to make logical sense out of angles.
I mean, I haven't watched a whole bunch of Ohio Valley, but, I mean, I hear that from people all the time that get the tapes. It's like, you got to watch Jim Cornette do commentary because, I mean, he knows exactly what's happening. He knows exactly how to tell the fans what's going on. There's no confusion. He's not talking about, how on Nitro it's always, you need to talk about the main event even though there's another match going on right here. It's like totally getting over the product, exactly like it needs to be gotten over, and that's what they need.
It's total, watching that show, for those of you who have been around for a long time, it's total mid-1980s, Mid-South wrestling, but without, Ted DiBiase's. You know what I mean? No Ted DiBiase in that bunch. I'm not knocking against those guys. They haven't been around long enough. Maybe someone will turn out to be one. But anyway, the poll question is, what do you think will be the number 2 sports entertainment group in the United States 1 year from today? So this is March of 2002. And I don't have WWF. I'm going under the assumption, maybe this is a faulty assumption, but I don't think it is, that WWF will be the number 1 group a year from today. Okay, so A is WCW, B is UFC, C is Pride, D is a foreign company like New Japan or AAA, and E is a startup domestic company, which means somebody's starting something up. I guess I could have F, and that is that there will only be one company.
Let's hope that's not.
But I don't want to say that.
Yeah.
Although it's as each day goes by, it becomes more and more of a possibility. Let's see. No Dusty Rhodes on Nitro tonight. That fell through a couple days ago. So we got, I don't even know what the main event is. Lex Luger and Sean O'Hare. I haven't seen an updated thing on Nitro. I know we got, Ilk Skipper and Kid Romeo against AJ Styles and Air Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And Easy Money's getting a tryout tonight. I think Kid Cash is getting a tryout tonight too, but I'm not positive of that one. And Raw, I haven't seen the preview yet, so we'll probably have that in a couple of minutes.
You haven't seen any preview?
Just the preview as far as the Paul Heyman stuff. But I mean, I haven't seen the matches or anything like that.
Okay, the matches they have announced so far: Chris Jericho versus Eddie Guerrero for the Intercontinental title, which seems like they've done that about 15 times and there's never been a finish. So.
Yeah.
Somehow I think there won't be tonight either, but...
Well, Benoit's getting involved in that, right?
Yeah, I'd assume. Ivory versus Lita for the women's title.
Okay, so China's going to get involved in that, most likely.
Oh, boy. Dudley's versus the Hardys for the tag titles.
Dudley's versus the Hardys. Now, where are they going with that? I don't know. We'll see.
I would guess Dudley's beat him when some with Matt and Jeff screwing up because of Lita.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's a good one.
And then Undertaker and Kane versus Haku and Rikishi.
Well, it's fine. It's only one match. Get it out of the way.
And also teasing the next chapter in the Rock versus Steve Austin WrestleMania main event.
Well, I'm figuring it's Rock and Austin against Angle and Regal, maybe? Something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking that I figured coming out of SmackDown they were going in that direction. We'll find out tonight. I have not heard anything more on that. Scott Hall's been in Japan now for 3 days, and I have not heard one news story. So I guess he's okay.
He's made it 3 days.
He's made it there 3 days.
Debuted in the main event.
Yeah, main event first 2 nights. I haven't heard anything about today's show yet. But
which day did he pin Nagata? Was that?
That was yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, in a tag match. It was Nagata and Kensuke Sasaki against Scott Hall and Scott Norton. I can just imagine Scott Hall and Scott Norton in the main event on a New Japan show. Although, I mean, my God. But, Norton's been there forever anyway.
Yeah.
All the reports I got on the 0-1 pay-per-view, and I got a lot of them, were just raving about the booking of the show, the heat on the show. So that's going to be pretty cool. Hopefully I'll get a tape of that in just a couple of more days. That was from Friday. So with all the matches that were set up and everything like that. So at least that's cool. I guess they may do some ECW type of a thing tonight. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. Let's see. This was on C-SPAN. It was actually taped from about a week ago with Jesse Ventura. Actually, before talking about Jesse Ventura, XFL ratings, they did 2.6 on the overnights on Saturday, which is 0.2 lower than the previous week, which probably will translate to, they ended up with a 2.4, so they're probably going to end up between a 2.2 and a 2.3. So
would that break the record?
2.3 would tie the record. 2.2 would break the record. There was actually one show that did a 2.2 on Christmas Eve, but they really don't count Christmas Eve because, let's face it.
No one's watching TV.
Yeah, no one's watching TV, exactly. So, realistically, the realistic record should be a 2.3, which was Game 3 of last year's Stanley Cup. So, this one could be, it will probably tie the record, and it may break the record. So, we'll find that out tomorrow. And the WF is still trying to spin that as somehow a positive. The UPN...
I know, I was reading the Ross report, and I was very embarrassed for Jim Ross.
It was sad, it's like... there were a lot of, shows on cable that were on in the afternoon or things like that, or even at night, as far as sporting events that did worse than the XFL. But, you can't compare... if you put the national rating of Raw, which would be, let's see, if they're doing, a 5.0 average on cable, that means that you're doing about a 3.9 national rating, okay? And you put that against the network programming on Monday night, it looks horrible because you can't compare because obviously a cable rating is going to be lower than a network, than an NBC rating. So you've got to factor that both ways. That that's equivalent. That's not equivalent to a 2.6 on ESPN. That's probably equivalent to, in fairness, put it this way: it's the lowest rated show on that network in prime time. It's the lowest rated show on every major network in prime time. So therefore, it should be equivalent to the lowest rated show on every major cable network in prime time if you really are trying to be fair. By the way, I figured out, got a whole thing in this week's Observer, but it's basically $32 million more that they're going to lose because of the bad ratings. And that's figuring...
On top of the $80 million?
As far as the startup, I figure probably startup... If it was going to be $80 million for the first year, because I think they were considering the $80 million in losses spread over maybe 2 to 2.5 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
Because they figured on breaking even on the third year. So probably the 80 to 100 million, which are the figures that I heard on startup, would be over 2 seasons. So, but probably most of them the first season. But I had heard $60 million they were expecting to lose. So tack on another 32. And you're going to have about, roughly $90 million in losses for this first season, which is 45 for WWF and 45 for NBC. I guess that there's a thing in the NBC contract where they can cancel the show in prime time, but they would have to pay like a penalty to the WWF of somewhere between 10 and 20 million, and they really don't want to write that check.
Well, I guess we'll find out. I guess it'll come down to, are they going to lose more than 20 million by keeping it there, or
yes.
Would it be better to just write the damn check and get it over with?
I think that the affiliates are going to really pressure them to write the check and get it over with.
Yeah.
I don't know. No,
maybe there will be affiliates chipping in.
Yeah, there also may be something where they may be able to get around it by putting it on like CNBC or something like that, which would be a death blow. But
yeah,
you know what I'm saying? But keep it in prime time next year.
Speaking of, I want to go over the poll for the website on the XFL. Your XFL prediction: they won't even finish the season is A. They'll fold after the end of the season is B. C is they'll play one more season, and D, they will continue playing for years to come. So head up there and vote.
Okay, what was the results of the announcer poll?
The announcer poll, who would you pick as Jerry Lawler's replacement? Of course, Paul Heyman was not on this list. And anyway, the results, 3,949 votes. So we're getting a ton of votes lately. I don't know why. Bobby Heenan, 34.3%. That was the highest. Mark Madden, poor Mark Madden, only got 4.8%. Joey Styles, 10.5%. Joel Gertner, 5.5%. Tom Zank, poor Tom Zank, 5.7%. Taz, 7.7%. Mick Foley, 19.4%. And somebody not mentioned above, 12%.
So really, it was Heenan by a landslide.
Yeah.
And why would that be? I mean, I know Heenan did great on the show, but aside from that, he hadn't done good in WCW in how many years?
Jeez, I don't know.
It's been
a while.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, they're putting well, of course you know this, that they're going to put cameras in the cheerleaders' locker room next week on the XFL. You know, the one thing that was so funny when I was watching the game is Jim Ross was going like, you know, like the tagline is, in a desperate attempt to increase our ratings. You know, they kept saying this throughout the show, like that's part of the script. You know, in a desperate attempt to increase our ratings, and it's like
the low ratings are a work. Just part of the storyline.
Not that the low ratings are a work, but that, you know, they're calling attention to the fact that their ratings are terrible, which is certainly unlike what you would normally do. You know, I mean, like when Raw was down doing those 1-7s, I don't think they were on there going like, in a desperate attempt to increase our ratings, we're going to give you a phony Razor and Diesel next week on this show.
We're going to put Steve Austin in the main event, and he's not going to wrestle for 8 weeks straight.
Yeah, but they built their ratings up doing that because they had nothing else.
I know. Think about that, though.
They built
it's like
their ratings up doing that.
It goes totally against what you would think. Well, they keep promising this main event we never deliver, and our ratings go up.
Yeah.
Well, Russo must have been sitting back there, just his mind just buzzing. Look how this
we never have to do wrestling matches. That's the silliest thing is to ever do wrestling matches.
Yes, we're not giving them a match, and our ratings are going up.
Yeah. Well, that's because Austin was getting on fire by not wrestling. Which, you know, there's something to be said about your top star not wrestling on television because it makes them something special, and you have to pay to see him. I mean, that was. You know,
look at Sting.
Yes, Sting. Well, look at WWF did that theory forever. I mean, how often did Hogan wrestle in the 80s on television? Except, you know, I mean, he'd never wrestle on the syndicated shows, or almost never. And when it was only to set up an angle. San Martino almost never wrestled on television. Backlund rarely wrestled on television. I mean, the WWF, that was the mindset for years and years, as the champion would very rarely wrestle on television. And when they did, it was always to set up a big angle.
I mean, when I was little, I didn't understand it. And I was always like, how come all these wrestlers come out and just kill these guys, and Hogan never does it? It never occurred to me.
Yeah.
But they were right.
Yeah. Jesse Ventura, this was on the C-SPAN thing a week ago. This is like actually really funny. Wes Jones sent this in. You know, they were asking him, you know, this is the thing, we talked about this like earlier, like last week as well, about, you know, why he has so much disdain for the press, so he gives his reasons. You know, about how they only want to report negative stories, things like that.
Yeah,
and the very next question is, well, now that you're a member of the media on the XFL, don't you feel like a hypocrite in light of what you're doing with Rusty Tillman? And Ventura's response was absolutely not. That what he's doing is entertainment, and he actually has great respect for Tillman.
Oops.
Oh, my God. And then that was in the same thing where when they asked him why the XFL wasn't succeeding, he said, Give yourselves a hand. You are the reason the XFL is not succeeding. The constant negative criticism by you guys is the reason the league is not succeeding. So, that's the reason.
The press is very powerful, causing 54 million people to stop watching a football game.
54 million. There were actually people who printed that 54 million, aside from the WWF, which is another weird story. And then he said that nobody from the league ever said they were going to be better than the NFL in any way, which is amazing.
Except the guy that owns it.
Constantly. Yeah. Anyway, so much for that. We're going to... any other news before we hit emails?
I don't think so.
Okay. This is from Scott. If Paul Heyman joining the WWF was the reason that Vince McMahon let Lawler leave, this was a very foolish move on McMahon's part. WWF has 2 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, an hour of Heat, and a pay-per-view once a month. It makes no sense to drop a guy like Lawler. In any event, it'll be interesting to see how Heyman's ideas are used by the WWF as far as booking goes, and how receptive the top guys are to Heyman. Somehow I don't think the top guys are going to be dealing with Heyman. I think Heyman's going to... If they do an ECW invasion, which they should, I just have this feeling that it's going to be used for these guys like Perry Saturn and Albert, that have no program.
Yeah.
This is quite embarrassing for the XFL. On their website today, they have a poll going, are you looking forward to the cameras in the cheerleaders' locker room next week? Granted, this is on the XFL website, right? 62% no. 37% yes. Let's see. I was listening to the show Friday when you were discussing Montreal. Oh, God.
Oh, boy.
But anyway, it got me to thinking, is there any chance Vince Russo never stopped working for Vince McMahon? A hell of a way to take the competition. People have theorized that. I personally don't believe it, but certainly that theory will be around forever. And it's, I don't put anything past Vince McMahon. I just kind of don't believe it. I just sense that. I don't think Russo's a good enough actor. That's my feeling.
Yeah.
From Ryan.
Plus, that company was self-destructing anyway.
Yeah.
It wasn't like they were on fire and just destroying Vince, and he just sent someone over to, destroy the company from within. It was already dying.
Okay, but when Russo went there, and you and I both know this, it could have been turned around, no problem.
Yeah.
Not no problem. It would have been a problem, but it could have been turned around. And when he was done...
It was unsalvageable.
It may be unsalvageable. It may very well be. This is from Ryan, who goes, lately Mike Tyson's been getting a lot of attention for boxing in the media, but nothing about wrestling in Japan. Is there a reason they keep it so secretive, or do American reporters not know about it? No, it's that no one takes it seriously. American reporters don't, it's a Japanese story that probably has no credence. And that's why, there's people around here who know, but all the Tyson's people are going, there's nothing to it. Do you know what the gate was for the May 1st, 1998 Tokyo Dome show? If that was the Inoki retirement show, it was $7 million, which is the largest gate, live gate anyway, in the history of wrestling, because this, like WrestleMania coming up, which will be the American record, is just over $3 million. Will Paul Heyman be a heel or babyface commentator? We don't even know for sure he'll be a commentator. I don't think he'll be either. Let's see. It's from Ken Murphy. He goes, you started talking about Jack and Frank Tunney. It got me curious. Whatever happened to Jack Tunney? I think a couple of years ago, he and the WWF kind of had their split, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
He was done. And what's the guy's name? Carl DeMarco's now running WWF Canada.
The thing with an ECW invasion angle, I was just thinking about this. If they really wanted to do it right, they could now, because ECW is pretty much just done. There really is no other company.
They are done. Don't say that they're pretty much.
Okay,
they are, unless
I was waiting for the death warrant to be signed, but
the death warrant is Paul Heyman going on TV is the death warrant being signed.
That's true. So anyway, if they're dead,
unless Vince McMahon is going to prop it up himself, and I'm sure that Vince doesn't want to pay that $7 million in debt to keep the name alive. So although I'm sure they'll use the name in their angle, but you know what I'm saying.
Okay, so with no other company, they could do this right, but the only problem with doing it right with the top guys right now is everything is building towards WrestleMania, and there's no way they're gonna, screw up those plans by having somebody come in and challenge Rock or Austin or anybody like that.
Oh, they're not even going to be involved in this.
Yeah.
David Woolbright, how about Arn Anderson as the color man in WWF or even WCW? Well, as far as WWF goes, unless WCW fires him, they wouldn't be able to take him. Arn Anderson might be really, really good in that role. And I'm shocked that WCW never gave him the opportunity to do it, because I remember a couple of years ago he expressed interest in wanting to go on one of the syndicated shows and try out as a color guy. and it never went anywhere. And I'm thinking, like, as good a talker as this guy is, you know, you would at least put him on one of those shows, give him a chance to sink or swim. Okay.
It's like the story of Arn Anderson's career.
Is it so weird?
Not getting a chance at a million different things.
Yeah. Notes here. Let me see as far as... there's a lot of news from Puerto Rico. Conan was in Puerto Rico all weekend. Apparently did very well there. Just to let you know, the Wrestling with Shadows website and your edited commentary is still up. That's nice to know. It's still there. It's not the whole story, though. On a related note, do you know if the reason Triple H got to the ring almost immediately following the match was to protect Shawn in case Brett decided to beat his ass then and there? Did Triple H get to the ring right away?
I think he was there pretty fast. I'm trying to remember what happened there.
That's probably what it is.
Yeah, he was, because I remember they were walking to the back together.
Okay. Could you tell me who played Shawn Michaels' Knights at Survivor Series 93? Was it Barry Horowitz, Greg Valentine, and Jeff Gaylord?
Yeah.
Or was Glenn? Okay. Hey, right off the top
Either
of my
Jeff
head.
Gaylord or Glenn. Everyone said it was Glenn Jacobs. But
Glenn Jacobs was originally one who's Kane, but he wasn't the one. But he didn't do it in that match. The muscular guy was Jeff Gaylord, and Terry Funk was supposed to be one of them and get unmasked, and he was actually in Boston, and for the Survivor Series, and he flew home the day of the show, without telling anyone. You should ask him about that sometime. That is very.
You know what you should do? I was just thinking about this. You should put up an archive issue of that first Survivor Series story that you wrote.
November 17th?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Should do that.
Otherwise, everyone's going to be going to the Wrestling with Shadows website and read the edited version.
Yeah. That's close.
Plus, if there's one newsletter that will sell newsletters, that's it.
That was good. It was a good issue.
Yeah.
What a week that was. Holy. That was so weird because that show went off the air. And I had a whole group of friends over because I pretty much knew everything that was going on that week as it was going on. And I knew that there was problems. And I also knew what the finish was supposed to be and wasn't. And I'm going like, that sure looked like, first of all, my friends go, that looked really weird. And then somebody called me up right away and just goes, I saw the Donnie Eagle. It was Donnie Eagle and maybe Gorgeous George. I forget who. Donnie Eagle lost his title in Chicago, and it was the exact same finish with the referee running at fast counting or double crossing and running, and they were sprinting out of the ring. And they're going like, when Hebner's sprinting out of the ring, it's guaranteed this is a double cross. And then all night long, I'm thinking, who knows, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like late at night, you start hearing Brett punched Vince. I'm thinking like, what? And at first when you hear that, you go, no, it's an angle, right?
Yeah.
Then I started hearing it from some friends of Brett. Actually, I wouldn't say close friends of Brett. They were wrestlers who Brett confided in that he called up late that night, who he wouldn't work. And they were telling me the whole thing and saying, for sure this is what it is. And then as the days went on, it was like, that was probably, except for Owen Hart's death, I think that was probably the biggest reaction to any news story that I can remember. Maybe David Von Erich's death in '84. That was a real big one. Brody's death in '88 was pretty big. But I mean, as far as like a non-death, that was it for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. Here is a list of guys that Vince Russo got over in WCW. Billy Kidman. No, he didn't.
No, he didn't. He killed him.
Yeah. Chronic, a little bit, but no one's over.
Yeah.
Jeff Jarrett, he tried. Jeff Jarrett's not over. Scott Steiner, I think he did a good job with Scott Steiner.
Yeah.
Booker T, I'll give him Booker T for sure. Chavo Jr., no. Lash LaRue, no way. David Arquette, okay, ha ha ha. Let's see. Do you see WF giving Benoit and Eddie Guerrero a decent length feud with some real meat to it? Yes, I do, by the way.
I kind of thought, I was reading, like Ross was talking about the Radicals in the Ross Report this weekend, and he talked about how, they're building towards something for WrestleMania, or something like that. I can't remember the exact term that he used, but I was sitting there, and just from reading it, it was like, they're going to do a four-way with all the Radicals at WrestleMania, which I would prefer Benoit versus Guerrero, but I kind of think that they may do the other one. I mean, it's a match with all four of them.
Oh, I don't like that. I guess it's unique. It's WrestleMania.
I would much prefer the singles match, but I just think that's what they're going to do.
We've got Jim Cornette on the line. Jim, how you doing today?
Dave, how are you? I'm just fine.
Hey, I'm doing really good. I overloaded myself on your commentary between 4 Hours of Ohio Valley and Rob Feinstein's tape. That was my weekend.
Well, you got to take a breath in between all that. You got to pace yourself. Go at it for the long haul. Be a marathon runner, not a sprinter.
Okay, and you were out there how long telling those stories? Because I've gotten through about maybe an hour or two of the Feinstein tape. Well, there's 2 tape set they sent me.
Oh, I don't even know how long it turned out to be. He said, I want you to just sit down and tell stories. I said, okay, how many days you got? And it was the same day. So I think it's probably 4, 5, 6 hours, something.
That was amazing. One of the things, I guess, what's your take on the Lawler thing?
I knew that was obviously going to be one of the first questions asked. And let me make a statement before I answer that on what you were just talking about while I was on hold. I was listening. Isn't it a shame, and doesn't that show you how gossip-oriented and trash TV-oriented America has become when you have to think of competing news stories for the Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels finish at Survivor Series? The only one you can come up with is somebody dying.
Yeah.
I mean, good Lord, is there more important things than who won the match?
Okay, you know what? It just reminded me of something, because I was going to ask you this, and I probably would have forgotten this. It was something that I was thinking, being that on Friday's show we got a whole bunch of Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels emails again, after not hearing about that story for a long enough time.
2 weeks.
Well, it is 4 years ago almost. You told me a couple months ago, and you actually made a really good point, the first person who ever made a good point on this, on why you think Shawn Michaels didn't know, as opposed to did know.
Oh, and I'm trying to think what I said, and one of the things that comes straight off.
Aside from that, you didn't think he was a good enough actor.
I'm sorry.
You didn't think he was a good enough actor, for one.
Well, yeah. I mean, obviously, you could see it on his face that he wasn't worried about what had happened, except that it screwed his matchup because he still had a couple more things to do. But also, I don't think that he knew about it, because I think the first thing he would have done would have been said something to everybody in the place, because he wouldn't want the heat to go on him. So that's the reason why I would think that he didn't know about it, because he wouldn't have been able to keep his mouth shut about it, because people already blamed him, said, Brett's wife or whoever said, oh, you were in on it. Well, no, he wasn't in on it, because that's the exact reason. I wouldn't have told the guy anything either. He would have been able to keep it to himself.
Now, the main reason everybody thought that he knew was the fact that, he was like looking at the ref and he looked right away when he rang the bell or something like that?
I think he was just puzzled.
Uh-huh.
I mean, and everybody has seen enough temper tantrums that Shawn Michaels has thrown when somebody doesn't move on the elbow. I think to see that his reaction was very genuine in that case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, once again, it's 3 or 4 years ago. It was the second. It wasn't even the first. It was the second world title double cross in Montreal in history. So I think it's a shame that has become the defining news story of the wrestling business of our age. But as far as the Lawler situation, I really, once again, I was not there in Phoenix. I only know what I've read on the Internet. Somebody, actually, I don't get on a computer either. Sorry to knock your show, but computers are the downfall of modern civilization. However, people have printed stuff out for me because of my interest in this. And I heard what Lawler had to say on his website, and I heard what the WWF had to say on their website. And I don't know the whole story, and I don't think the whole story's out there, so I really can't say who was at fault or who was a knucklehead for acting the way they did, because there's something there that is not being told that doesn't meet the eye on one or both sides. Because I don't see the sense in what all happened as it's presented, and I don't know the story. So all of it, I've had people say to me, well, Lawler should have realized that, it wasn't going to last forever, that his girlfriend was going to have a job, it was a gravy thing. Well, yeah, and I'm sure, as I know Jerry Lawler, he's smart enough to realize that. So he must have been more offended about the way that it was done than the fact that it was done. However, the way that it was done, they don't do business like that any other time. As a matter of fact, it's been a joke in some cases. It's awful hard to get fired from the WWF. You really got to screw up really bad. They've taken care of so many people that have done so many stupid things that I don't know why they would have been so anxious to, remove Cat from their roster. So maybe there's something there. I don't know, so I'm not going to pick a side on this one.
How big a blow do you think it is to the company?
once again, it's a blow to the company, to the people who like Lawler's commentary and his work, and it's a blow that they have to fill that slot on some of their television shows when they've already got an overworked announce staff in Jim Ross, who, let's face it, is their announce staff practically. He's going to have to carry more burden, I would think, having people who are not as experienced as Lawler on the air with him. But, once again, let's face it, Bret Hart left, Ultimate Warrior's left. Every big star in the world has left every promotion in the world at one time or another, and they've gone right along. So it's a blow in terms of the workload on some people and in terms of the presentation of the show, but it's not going to, and this is not a knock on Lawler, it's not going to mean anything as far as the revenue of the pay-per-views or the houses, et cetera, is concerned, because the WWF now is big enough, I think, to lose anybody. They lost Austin while he was out with an injury and chugged right along. So I don't think any one person is going to adversely affect the WWF in a huge way.
As far as now, one of the candidates that would have been brought up to do that is you, and in fact, I actually talked to some people about that, and it was never even considered because of the feeling that you would not have wanted that role at all, right?
Well, no. As a matter of fact, somebody at our television here last week at our OVW TV said, "Are you going to replace Lawler on Raw?" And I said, "No, because we couldn't come to an agreement to have him shoot it every week in Louisville." Now, under those circumstances, I would have hopped on the job. But, maybe Indianapolis. I'll go as far as Nashville. But I don't believe they were in the frame of mind to renovate their entire booking schedule to shoot Raw within a 180-mile radius of Louisville just to get me to co-host the show. So I would think that's probably not going to take place.
Well, one of the things I want to mention is I was watching a bunch of the Ohio Valley tapes this weekend, and I saw the commentary that you did on the Christmas Chaos match with Nick Dinsmore and Chris Benoit. And I want to make this point, because I already wrote about it, and that is that that match was probably, I don't know how much of it you showed on TV. It seemed like about 5-6 minutes. But your commentary and the story that you told, and basically the story was that if Nick Dinsmore were to pin Chris Benoit, it would springboard him onto Raw because he would pin Chris Benoit. And the whole thing is like, if he wins this match, he's going to be on Raw. It's like it's his big break and all this. And then he finally, after all this time, hits the German suplex, and Rico Constantino does a run-in, and it's a DQ finish. And that finish, 99 times out of 100, you go long match, and then just heel interfere DQ. It's like this finish where I'm going to go, oh, God, I watched the match for 15 minutes with this cheap finish.
Right.
And your commentary made it where that finish had the right kind of heat as opposed to the wrong kind. Because it's like, we've seen that finish a million times, and you just groan, but you presented it. And it was the presentation of it, and then the presentation of Rico Constantino that he really screwed that guy, as opposed in a way that made you mad, as opposed to in a way that said, oh, God, I just invested 15 minutes and they couldn't give me a finish.
Well, and I guess that's a commentary on the business in general these days, that you get commented or you get complimented when you just do something the way you're supposed to do it. And it's a sad thing, but that was a great match. And by the way, you said 5 or 6 minutes. I think we showed 10, which shows that it was a good match because you didn't feel like you were sitting there watching something for 10 minutes.
Well, the whole point is it was real long, and that, and it was a hell of a match, too.
And I think that's part of it is that Chris Benoit came in never having been in the ring with Nick Dinsmore in his life, not knowing anything about the kid, and developed during the time they were in the ring a real respect for him to the point where Benoit was saying to people afterwards that he would love to come back and wrestle Nick Dinsmore again. And Nick Dinsmore, in his hometown, in front of the biggest crowd that OVW has ever drawn, a sellout at the Gardens, with all the pressure on him, defending the OVW title in a marquee match that had been talked about for 3 months, he had to be just shaking like a dog pooping peach seeds with nerves. But he went out there, and he stayed with Benoit and looked exactly like he belonged in the same ring with the guy. And that was a real compliment to Nick. And they had a great match, and I had a great match to be able to commentate. And the fact that people have seen, quote unquote, that finish so many times doesn't negate the fact that when they see it, when it makes sense, when it's right, when it is presented well, and when it's executed by all the parties, that's what should be done. You don't go out there and do something that they've never seen before just for the sake of surprising people, because you know what? I've never seen a guy lay down in the ring and go to sleep and take a nap, but that doesn't mean it'd be exciting. That just means people be going, what the heck do you do that for?
How about a one-finger world title switch?
Unfortunately, I've seen one of those, but don't expect to see them on any card that I'm involved with, because I'd hit the ring by the 2 count. But
anyway, we
that's the
hit.
thing. You don't. A lot of times people say, "Well, we're really surprised them. They ain't expecting this." Well, you know what? In some cases, you don't need to give them something they're not expecting because there's a reason they're not expecting it because it wouldn't make any sense or it wouldn't draw.
Isn't that funny? We usually make that almost those exact same comments about 3 times a week on this show.
And I can't be blamed for plagiarism because the only time I hear your show is when I'm on it because I don't have a computer. So, see,
We've got a ton of emails here.
Hey, Dave, if I could, I'd like to make one point about what we were just talking about because I'm really so glad that you liked the Dinsmore and Benoit match and the commentary and et cetera. And I think that a lot of people, and this is the shameless plug also, we're finishing up the production of the Christmas Chaos home video, which we're going to have on our website, ovwrestling.com. You can already order it now. But the Chaos event, we tried to have different types of matches. And Dinsmore and Benoit went in the ring and had a classic, old-time, old-style championship match with great performance on both guys' side. We had the Monsters match with Kane and Leviathan, had the Hardcore match with all the furniture in the ring. And what is also on the tape that stole the show that we did not air on television, that actually surprised a lot of people, was Matt and Jeff Hardy and Lita against Payne, Damien, and Sin, which is the match really that stole the show when there were so many candidates. But you saw the raw footage of the whole event and the crowd response.
No, I haven't seen the raw footage of the event.
You have not? I thought I sent it to you.
No, you didn't. I've just all I've got is all your TVs.
Well, the sixth person did not air on television, but the people thundered through the entire match, and when Jeff Hardy swanton Sin through the table, the pop was rivaling, if not exceeding, Steve Austin's. And so that showed that people got into a variety of different kind of matches, and that's what I think is missing also on a lot of shows these days is you give them 18 matches of the same kind, and no matter how good they are, eventually they can't follow one another because it's more of the same.
You know, one thing that I've really enjoyed on your TV is Rico Constantino.
He's fabulous.
As a heel, it's kind of a mix between Rick Martel and Kurt Angle is kind of how I view it. But he's really, and he was coming along pretty good as a babyface, but as a heel, he's one of those guys where they're doing pretty good as a babyface, and you turn him heel, and it's like, wow, he really clicked.
Yeah, and it was about that time too, and Rico had done about as much as he could do in the position that he was in. The kid he's phenomenal. He's a prodigy as far as learning this business. But now he's able to really go out there and show a whole lot more personality than I think he was doing before, and he's more comfortable with it. He wouldn't have been ready maybe 6 months ago to be that comfortable and be able to do that, but now he is, and I think it's really helped him.
One of the big thing that he's got going against him is age. I mean, it's like, he's actually, I think, 38, 39 years old, and doesn't look it, but he is, and it's like, if he was 15 years younger, I would go like, this guy's, he's gonna make it and be a big star.
Well, but
with him, the time, his time, I think that's one of the reasons why, whenever, like you see in the Ross report when they mention guys, his name is not mentioned, and when I look at the show, I mean, he's much farther along than the guys who are mentioned.
Oh yeah, and I don't think that has anything to do with it really. I mean, it always has a bearing, but you got to understand that he has not been abusing his body for the past 15 years in wrestling. He has been relatively injury free except for the knee, which was something that could have happened to anybody. He just he landed wrong on a flip and tore a quad. But except for that surgery, he's been injury free. And if you ask somebody that's looking at him in the ring, how old is this guy? They say 28. And nobody takes into account Stan Lane, when he was in the Midnight Express tearing the house down every night, was about the same age that Rico is now, and he didn't look it either, and nobody brought it up because it wasn't a factor. I think he's got, because guys now, their careers are shorter than they used to be because they make more money and also because of the style. But conversely, even if you get in a little bit later, if you have the talent to learn what you're doing, you got a shorter window of time, but you can still make some money.
Now, I got a question also for one of the things is Flash Flanagan.
Yes.
Do
me a favor. Send out a bulletin. Flanagan is dead. Flanagan is gone. His name is Flash.
Okay,
we still have that problem. He changed that like a year and a half ago, and still
I actually know that.
It is hung on.
But anyway, he did that thing at the I guess it would be at your January show or your February show, where he was that a work?
What thing?
Where he did kind of like a blockbuster move and landed with his head on a chair.
The whiplash. Actually, he came down. He didn't land head first on the chair, but he came down sideways on his shoulder, and you know, let's face it, Flash is I won't say he's injury prone, but he works with injuries constantly. And in this case, the way that he landed, the way that he felt afterwards, he had numbness in his arm. It spooked a lot of people. He was all right afterwards, but it was the concern was there at, you know, when it happened. But you know, he shakes things off that a lot of other people would have trouble with, and he's always at the doctor, but he always gets it up and goes right through it. So he took I want to say 10 days off, and you know, he was cool after that.
Okay, let's go to the phone calls. We'll start with PJ in San Francisco. PJ, what's up?
Hey, Jim.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Very good.
I was watching some old Memphis tapes the other day from, like, 1982.
Yes.
And I was watching where you, like, debuted in managing. Do you remember that? I guess
unfortunately, I thought I'd managed to burn or buy up all the copies of those tapes, but yes, they still exist.
Oh, those tapes are great. You were doing the gimmick where your mom financed your managing career.
Right.
Yeah, that was great. I was wondering where that angle ever led, because the last part I have on my tape is where you were out there with Dutch Mantell, and you said you had him signed up, and then he like tore up the contract on TV.
Yeah, well, obviously, you know, I'd managed Dutch for like 1 week, and of course in that week, since I was a rookie manager, didn't know what I was doing, I managed to get him disqualified in his title match with Lawler. So he told me to hit the bricks, and at that point, I began, as one would think I would, desperately searching for people to try to get even with Dutch Mantell, and that was guys like Crusher Broomfield, who later became famous, not through any of my managerial efforts, as the one-man gang. Jesse Barr, Adrian Street came in the picture about that time, so I had a lot of people chasing after first Dutch Mantell and then all the rest of the heroes of Memphis.
How long were you in that territory? Doing that?
For about 1.5 years, mostly. Give or take about 6 weeks that I went somewhere else that didn't work out.
Okay, and where'd you go after that? You went to Georgia or whatever?
Actually, the Georgia was in the middle.
Okay.
We went to Georgia for 6 weeks, a lot of us, and hardly anybody remembers it, and it would probably bore the listeners to death to tell the story. And then after...
I remember Terry Taylor and Bobby Fulton as the original Fantastics, right?
Exactly. Dave remembers it. Yeah. Me, Dave, and some wino in Atlanta under the overpass remember that. But actually, from Tennessee, my first real territory I went to was Mid-South Wrestling.
Uh-huh. And was Memphis your very first exposure on camera?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I was from here, and at the time didn't really have any plans to go anywhere else. But starving versus an offer of people paying me money changed my mind.
Well, that was some great stuff, despite what you may think looking back on it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Another question about the Midnight Express. Do you know who did their theme music?
Actually, the original theme music that we used for quite a while until Crockett started getting into a licensing difficulty with using commercial music was the theme music from the movie The Midnight Express. It came out in 1978, and it was an instrumental done by a guy named Giorgio Moroder, who was the producer for all of Donna Summer's disco hits.
Uh-huh.
And it's on the movie soundtrack if anybody can find it.
Yeah. At Starrcade, I guess it was 87 when you went off the scaffold.
That was 86. I can remember that one.
Okay. Did you basically know that you were going to get hurt, or was there any hope in your mind that you might land the right way?
You were going to survive that fall.
You know, I've never had anybody ask me that question exactly like that. You know, let's put it this way. I knew that it probably wasn't going to turn out well, but I didn't know how bad it would turn out, or I wouldn't have been stupid enough to do it.
Yeah. Was that totally your idea to do it, or?
No, I was sold on that one by one of the great car salesmen of our time.
Dusty Rhodes?
American Dream himself.
Yeah.
But
it sounded like a good idea on paper.
As I was hanging there, it was running through my mind that there's no way this could turn out really well for me. But I didn't realize the extent of it until I landed. Well, I didn't realize the extent of it until about 10 minutes after I landed.
Yeah.
Then I figured, well, you know, that's probably one of the things that I should not have done in my life.
Yeah, well, it was a great visual for what it's worth.
Yeah, hey, if I did it, at least I'm glad it was on video.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's about all I've got. It was good talking to you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Jim, I know this is probably a loaded question, but what are your thoughts on Paul Heyman showing up on Raw tonight?
Is he going to?
Yes.
Oh, well, hell, sooner or later, even a blind squirrel finds a nut. I was going to watch Raw just to see who was going to do the show instead of Lawler and how it was going to turn out for JR. But now that you've warned me, I may switch over to well, they don't have Outer Limits Monday on Sci-Fi anymore, so you know. But
you can always watch Nitro.
Dinner, and I don't really want to see Paulie's face because I'm afraid it'll give me indigestion.
Let's go to Phil in DC. Phil, what's going on?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Great.
Really good.
Jim, I had actually asked this question to Dave, and he suggests I asked it to you. I was watching some 1990 WCW television matches, and that was the period they brought in Rip Rogers to work as
the Rip Rogers question, yeah.
enhancement guy.
The Rip Rogers question.
Yeah, Rip Rogers question. I was super impressed with how good he was. I mean, he was like one of the top guys on there. He never won a match, but he had a really, really great bunch of matches with Pillman and.
Right, I remember the one with Pillman where Pillman did the air Pillman off the balcony, right?
Oh yeah,
the overhang or whatever.
Breaking his neck.
Yeah,
and he had a really great match with Terry Taylor on like NWA New York or something like that. And I was watching it. It looked like Rip Rogers looked to me, and I haven't seen that much of the stuff on tape. It's like a hidden great worker that never ever really got anywhere. And I know that you work with him, and I guess you still work with him now in Ohio Valley. And why do you think he never really became a big star?
Well, Rip's work was as good as anybody's at one point, and he was a phenomenal athlete, and he's right now hampered by basically having done this for 26 years or whatever, and his knees are not the best, and his shoulder's bad. But the point is, he would go out there and he could tear the house down with anybody, and that's a time when WCW had a lot of younger guys, a lot of green guys, a lot of guys that they were paying a lot of money to that were not motivated. And they got a guy like Rick in who didn't have a contract, who wanted to go out there and steal the show and have the best match, and he would. And the problem, I think, became is that politically, Rip wasn't the guy that they wanted to feature. They didn't look at talent or at ability or whatever. I mean, it's been the same way a lot of places, a lot of times, but they were looking at, we're paying this guy a lot of money, so we got to feature him. And wait a minute, this other guy just, he looks twice as good as the guy we're paying a bunch of money to. Heck with him, he basically shot himself in the foot by being overqualified. But Rip, in his career, worked in a variety of different territories for almost every promoter in the business. But he was never able to get the national television exposure because the right place and the right time just didn't come up. And when it did, unfortunately, the people making decisions were more qualified for pricing pizza than they were for evaluating wrestling talent.
I have another quick question. Who do you think was the best overall worker you ever managed, and who was like the dirt worst?
Well, the dirt worst is very easy. Does anybody remember the name Mantar?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
That was a real
Mike Alec in the WWF as your bodyguard, right?
Yeah, poor Mike. Well, wasn't even a body. Actually, I could have took better care of him. Bodyguard, but we won't even go any further. God bless him, nice guy. But as far as the best, it's hard to argue against Bobby Eaton. I mean, obviously, I managed a lot of great talent at one time or another, and I mean, had loose affiliations with guys like Dick Murdoch, who. All around, Dick Murdoch was one of the 10 best workers in the business, and also could cut a heck of a promo, and was hilarious to be around. So I mean, you can't obviously put him off the list, but time in, time out, and just for the caliber of what he did and how good he was, I don't think you can argue with Bobby Eaton as being the best guy overall ever managed.
Yeah, I was watching some Best of a Midnight Express tape a little while ago, and they had a big mini feud between Bobby Eaton and Dusty Rhodes, like over the U.S. title. Do you remember that?
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, but a lot of times, even though Bobby was in a team, and this came up with Dusty, this came up with Flair, it came up with Ricky Morton, guys would want to work with him in singles matches just to be able to work with Bobby. And same situation happened with Flair, where they did a few Sunday main events for the old TBS main event show for the NWA title, and a couple of different times Bobby would be pulled out into singles just so that they would have a chance to see different matches, and those guys would get a chance to get in the ring and work with him. That was Flair's idea, by the way, to just get in the ring with Bobby in a single match, because so many of the boys had been wanting to see what would happen.
Because I remember their one in the Clash, but I don't think I ever saw any of those ones on the main event. I remember being a little disappointed with their Clash match.
Clash match that got cut short on time.
Yeah, the Clash match came after. The Clash match was a couple of years after that, as after Stan and I had already left, and I remember seeing it and remember also saying, hey, how could they give this 13 minutes, and come to find out it was supposed to be like 25.
And it was a free-fall match. That was the problem.
Yeah, but the two matches on the Sunday main event show I thought were were really good. And when you consider that they're the first two singles matches that Bobby had ever had with Flair, and actually one of the first 3 or 4 times he'd ever even been in the ring with him, they clicked right off the bat.
Oh, wow. I'm going to have to start to search my tape list for that. This one's great.
This is from Jason Campbell. If some of the smaller OVW wrestlers, such as Rob Conway, Nick Dinsmore, or Flash, were not called up to the WF, would you advise them to try to get into WCW?
Well, first off, I wondered how big he is to call them the smaller guys. They're smaller, but that's like, they're 230 and 240. Well, Conway's 226, but he's got body fat of like 1%. If they were not, I certainly would. Well, I mean, by the time that we're going to determine whether or not they're going to be called up or not, WCW may not indeed exist. I would always tell somebody to pursue the best career, the best job that they can make. But that would be hard advice to have to give anybody unless they had no alternatives, because there's a company that nobody really knows who owns it, if they're going to own it, how long it's going to run or exist or whatever. And it's not through any hard feelings between myself and prior management at this point. It's just common sense. If that's the only alternative, take it. But if you have any other alternatives or hope to have, why hook yourself up to a sinking ship, when you don't know when it's going to go down?
Now, was Jason Lee working with you?
Say again now?
Jason
Yeah,
Lee?
what were your thoughts about Jason Lee going to WCW?
Yes, all bad. And let's be honest, Jason Lee, actually, he went and did one TV or 2 TVs the one night and don't know whether he's going back. I have thought for a while that he and Derek King are my favorite tag team in the business, and I think that he has a lot of talent, and I think that his size issue, because now they're 195 and 200, that has worked against him, because if he could perform like he can and he weighed 230 or 240, he'd have a deal. I've been frustrated that I could not get a deal or help him get a deal. But the problem there is that he didn't inform us that he was going before he went. And that didn't sit good with Danny, who trained him, and it certainly didn't sit good with me, who's booking him. So now Jason is sitting for right now, and, we're going to see what happens with that.
And he also goes...
by the way, I would not have advised him not to go, because he did make a very nice payoff for doing what he did, and he also opened up an opportunity for himself to be seen. However, I still adhere to the old business practices of when you work at a territory for somebody, if you're going to do something that's going to be seen or impact that territory or affect the people involved in it in any way, you let the booker know, and he didn't. So that's the mistake that he is right now hopefully rethinking his thought processes on.
So you're not using him right now?
Not right now, no. Because basically, for one thing, it's hard to use somebody when Danny Davis don't want to look at him.
Yeah.
And he's the boss.
He goes, well, why don't you use Rip Rogers more on TV?
Well, we touched on that a little earlier. Rip has a hand in running our shows, the promotion of our shows, and also, working and coaching the classes from time to time, but he has had some injuries catch up with him that he has actually had nagging him for quite some time, and he's in a position right now where he's not really wanting to wrestle until he gets all the feeling back in his fingers and toes and is able to get up and in and out of chairs without, considerable effort. So he is resting his body up right now.
How is Eric Angle doing?
Eric is a tremendous athlete. It's too early to tell how he's doing as far as what type of worker he's going to be, but he's got a great attitude. He's a good kid. He's got a great background, and he has taken well to, the basics. I mean, he's only been here 2 weeks. So he's taken well to the basics, but how many basics can you go through in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
I think if I had to say, I think it would be way optimistic to say that there's 2 prodigies at that level in the same family. However, it's possible, and we sincerely hope it is.
I was going to ask about Randy Orton, Bob Orton's son.
Right. He's doing tremendous. I think you've seen from the recent television, Randy is putting on some size. He's looking good. He's tanned. He's more comfortable in the ring now. He's really got the timing down. I mean, he was a natural to begin with. He just had like 8 matches when he came here, and so he has really been somebody that's sucked up and made the effort and has really improved. And I mean, he's still only, I think, 20 years old. So it's he's going to be phenomenal because he's getting such a head start. And that's the difference in guys now and guys of 15 or 20 years ago. The guys now are doing things a lot better athletically, but they don't have time to get the experience before that their body breaks down on them. Well, this kid is starting at the time when all the guys used to start, and he's not going to break down before he's able to get that experience. So I think he's going to be fabulous.
What are some of your favorite matches and angles from Memphis, both before and after you became a manager there? So this is even like as a fan growing up.
Oh, God. Well, you know, almost everything involved Lawler. So, I mean, right there, you know, that takes the top 10 spots. But I always loved Joe LeDuc. I was a big Joe LeDuc fan, and the stuff that he did with Lawler, and the blood oath with the axe, and the Tupelo concession stand brawl. You know, stuff that still a lot of people have seen. I don't know. I don't have my finger on the pulse these days, so I don't know how many people have been without that, how many people haven't seen stuff like that, because it was so widespread, you know, when it happened, and for the first several years of you know, people started to trade tapes. But the thing with Lawler and Dundee and Ferris and Latham and Tupelo that started all the concession stand brawls was one of the most memorable things I ever saw. And Jimmy Valiant's interrupting NWA World Title match with Harley Race and Jerry Lawler breaking a bottle over Lawler's head. You know, all that stuff stood out at that time because it was not, every show didn't have 7 segments and 7 angles. So you had a chance to remember stuff. Not only was it well done, but it was also presented as an earth-shaking occurrence rather than as something that just happened right before you went to the break. And that's kind of, you know, even though we have to keep the pace up here now, that's still what we try to do for the things that are really important. We try to, like you were talking about with Dinsmore and Benoit, we try to place importance on them so that people will remember them and it'll stick. Because a lot of that memorable stuff would have never been retained by people if it wasn't followed up afterwards and talked about like it was a big deal.
I don't think that the stuff now, even though there's a lot of people who watch wrestling now, I think that like a lot of the personalities will get over, but as far as individual angles, I think it's tougher because back then, the big angle. I mean, I remember the big angles from 20 years ago better than the angles from 2 weeks ago because 20 years ago I saw one every couple months, and 2 weeks ago I saw 14 that night. You know what I mean?
And you know, I think there's a middle ground that you've got to go to, and you've got to stay there where you don't present so little that people get bored waiting for something to happen, but you don't present so much that they can't retain what they've seen.
I think that's the thing right there.
That's a big problem. I think that a lot of people have passed that by.
I think that's the real key one because to me, my test of an angle is when the show is over, if I don't immediately remember all the details of an angle, then I know the angle didn't get over because I'm watching it close, and I know that people who are watching it while they're vacuuming or while they're playing with their dog or while they're talking to their kids, if they're not watching with the same concentration I am, and if I don't remember the angle, I know that they didn't either.
Yeah, exactly. And all the great angles down through history, if you go back and you watch them now, you've been desensitized by seeing things that are more daring or more dangerous or more obscene or more vulgar or more whatever. So it doesn't impact you like it did when you originally saw it. But when you think about it and you go back, you without going back and watching the tape, you always think it was worse in your mind, or it was more horrifying, or the injury was worse, or the bump was bigger, because that's the way it impacted you at the time. I remember when the famous match in the Omni, where Ole Anderson turned on Dusty Rhodes. My God, they had a riot that night. You know, it took them 45 minutes to get the heels out of the ring and out of the arena, and the people were trying to climb the cage. And it wasn't anything that you don't see every Monday night these days, but it was the personalities involved and the way it was presented and the time it took to build it up.
Well, I think like a lot of things 20 years from now that are going to be remembered are, like half of them are things that really weren't planned, like, you know, Montreal.
Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels.
And Bret Hart swearing in that cage match because they thought it was off the air or whatever the deal was. Or just like the really horrible angles, like Big Show falling off the building, or
David Arquette winning the world title.
Yeah, well, right off the bat, you can dismiss any angle that people don't believe.
Yeah. Because
then they're not going to remember because they're not going to care. And see, that's why the people remembered the old-time angles, because they believed it. First and foremost, you didn't need to set up, you know, their suspension of disbelief. It was already there, and then they saw it, and wow. Now the things they remember are the Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, the things that were unplanned, that weren't supposed to happen, that were really a shoot, or they remember the things that they thought were shoots but were really not, and they can't tell the difference. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what they remembered in 1979. They remember the same thing 22 years later, but you just have to plan a little harder and execute a little better.
Now, one thing when you were talking about things that when you look back won't look as bad. One thing 20 years from now, when people look back at that tape, that will look just as bad as it did a few weeks ago was Sid's broken leg.
I have not seen that yet, but I've talked to a couple people that have, and yeah, they said it looked like Theismann sprained his ankle compared to this, and I'm not sure I'm really anxious to see that.
Yeah, that's the one that'll hold up for 100 years.
But, you know,
maybe the only one.
Sid's been in the business 15 years. He tries to come off the top rope one time and cripples himself.
This is
it was the middle rope.
Oh my God! I thought it was the top. It was the middle. That's even worse.
I hate to make fun of Sid, but it was the middle rope.
I think my mother could come off the middle rope.
They thought he was trying to be Jumbo Tsuruta. He's not. Let's see. This is. Do you have any interest in running OVW in Indianapolis?
We have a television outlet in Indianapolis. It's a low power station, but it has a lot of cable coverage. But you know, Indianapolis is a market that's been both burned in the past by local wrestling organizations, and is a pretty major market in terms of expense and you know what it would take to really promote on a major level there. So I'm not going to rule it out for in the future, but there aren't any immediate plans.
Okay, let's see. This is of these three angles. Of these three, which was your favorite? The angle where you turn on the dynamic dudes. Now I remember that was one of my favorite. The angle with Paul Lee with the original Midnight Express, and then the other one was when you showed up at the ECW arena.
Well, my favorite one of the three, I like the deal with the dudes, but at the time we were looking at it as nothing more than something to do. But a lot of people remembered it because it was one of the first, one of the first, not the first, but one of the first clashes, and a lot of people saw it, and also because they were so sick of the dudes at that point because they were such offensive baby faces. With the skateboards and the weird hats and etc. They just loved seeing us whack them. The thing with Paul Lee was my favorite because of everybody's performance involved. It didn't draw any money because that was at the time of the sale to TBS, and a lot of things happened, and it never drew a dime. But it was it was a great angle, and everybody performed well. And the thing in the ECW arena wouldn't even make my top 15 list just because the only people that were really impacted by it were the people there in the arena were surprised to see me. We never followed it up. I never came back. There was never any, anything made of it to sell tickets. It was just, and that's the way it was presented as such at the beginning. They just wanted a surprise. Well, by gum, they were all surprised. But that's, it was a nice night. That's about as far as it went.
This is from Scott Four. He goes, hypothetical question. You're on a canoe trip. Well, first of all, this will never happen.
Well, I was about to say, right there, we've gone off into fantasy.
No.
I'm on a canoe trip.
First of all, he's not going to be on a canoe trip. Second of all, the other people in the canoe are Paul Heyman, Vince Russo, Phil Mushnick, Eric Bischoff, and Jim Herd.
Oh, my God.
So that's a canoe trip.
Now, give me a list. We got Russo, Bischoff, Herd, Paul Lee,
Phil Mushnick, and Paul Lee.
And myself.
Okay.
Canoe.
So since the canoe capsizes, well, first of all, Jim's turning the canoe over.
Why don't you put Mark Madden in there? Put Madden
Mark
in there.
Madden's in there, too.
I just thought Madden wouldn't fit in a canoe. He'd need a steamship. But I think you ought to put that on pay-per-view.
Okay. So anyway, the canoe capsizes. You can only rescue one of them, but you have to rescue one of them. So who is it?
Okay, I can only rescue one when the canoe capsizes.
And you have to rescue one. You can't just say, I just...
one.
But you have to rescue one.
I'll pull Russo out. Because seriously, if the canoe capsizes, all those people are drowning. I'm the only one that can swim. I got to rescue one. I pull Russo to the bank. Then there's no witnesses to what I do to him from there. And he's the only one that I really hate enough to not just want to sit there and see drown, to actually risk my life to pull his carcass out of the water so that I can stick my thumb in his eye.
Oh, my God. Let's go to Craig in Pennsylvania. That was not the answer I was expecting. Craig, what's going on?
Hello.
Craig.
Come in, Craig.
Hello?
Speak up.
Craig, what's up?
Jim Cornette.
Yes, sir.
What if...
See ya. See ya. Let's go to Todd in New York. Todd, what's up?
Hey, what's up? You guys coordinated that joke on the canoe, didn't you?
No, someone sent it. Scott Foy sent it in, and I was just reading it. That was the first I saw of it, too.
That's the first I heard of it, but I'm intrigued by the idea now, to tell you the truth.
Hey, how are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
That's good. First, I just wanted to pass along. I got some OVW tapes recently, and I was struck by the exact same thing you were, Dave, and that it was something that made me remember why I enjoyed Smoky Mountain Wrestling so much, because they actually told a story, and the same thing with Ohio Valley Wrestling now. They actually told a story in every match, so that if you just watched a match, you didn't have to watch 5 hours of television to enjoy that match in itself, and that really sort of resonated with me. I had a couple questions for Jim. The first one, in terms of WWF now, with Heyman coming in as his announcer or whatever he's going to do, it's sort of an interesting dichotomy where you have all these guys who once were, sort of enemies of the WWF all under the same umbrella. What with, Heyman and JR, even yourself, Jim, with the Ohio Valley Wrestling, where all the enemies have sort of ended up in the same place. And I was wondering what all you guys think is, whether that's going to cause any sort of problems, because it's very different. It's a very different setting when you mix a bunch of different wrestling minds as opposed to mixing a bunch of different wrestlers. And now you've got all these different people with different backgrounds and different ambitions, and they're all sort of in the same boat, so to speak.
Well, I think that it makes for obviously an interesting catering room at the tapings. But the thing is, and this is what everybody's got to understand, and hopefully they're starting to now, the reason why the WWF has continued to flourish and the reason why everybody else hasn't is because it doesn't matter whether everybody's on the same page. It just matters whether the guy at the top's on the same page. And Vince McMahon is always going to be where Vince McMahon wants to be, whether people like that or not, or whether they agree with his opinion or not. And, of course, everybody knows Vince McMahon's idea of wrestling and my idea of wrestling is very separate, but at the same point, he runs the company, the buck stops there. Anybody who doesn't want to do within his framework what they can for the company gets booted. And either that or find someplace else to go and, take somebody's money like Russo did. So if Paulie and Jim Ross and myself and, let's pick 3 or 4 more names and throw them in there, if we all don't agree with each other as people, well, that's fine. And I'm sure that if it came to it, Vince would like to sit down and watch several of us, swing at each other. But as long as we're working for him, we've got to do what we believe is the right thing for the WWF, and that all goes through the editor, which is Vince McMahon. So as far as the power struggles in WCW, where Hogan wants this and Piper wants that and Bischoff wants that, that ain't going to happen because Vince has the power and he will give other people authority, but ultimately there can be no power struggle because the only person Vince would be able to choke would be himself. And that's why you've always got to have one guy at the top. That's why it's successful.
Do you think there might be some, this is for all you guys, do you think there might be some sort of explosion similar to what might have happened to get, Lawler out, that might happen between sort of the under people as they're sort of struggling to get Vince to go in a certain direction? Because there's sort of a lot of different directions. Well,
I don't think there was anything like that with the Lawler situation at all. It wasn't about the direction of the company or whatever. It was a talent relations issue between, Jerry himself, his wife, and the company, which is totally different than what you would have if you had, Jim Ross trying to do one style and Paulie trying to do another style and Bruce Pritchard over there trying to do something else. In the end, Vince is going to be the one to decide. And Vince was willing to go with Vince Russo for a while, but he didn't go with everything. We saw what happens when Russo goes with everything that he wants to do on WCW. It's not a pretty sight. Vince will go as far as he wants to go with something, as far as he thinks it's successful, and then he's going to be the guy to say, well, you know what, maybe we better back up or turn left, and if those people don't go, then they can't go along for the ride.
I got another random question sort of on this sort of theme. Like, it was just striking me. Dave and Brian were talking about how everyone in WWF ends up getting humiliated at one point or another, whether it's you or Jim Ross or Kevin Kelly or, everyone throughout their history, Finkel. And I was thinking the one guy they never humiliated was Gorilla Monsoon, who always had this very dignified announcer position, then the dignified commissioner, and then sort of the elder statesman at the end. And I was wondering if you had any insight as to why that was.
Well, and everybody says humiliated, and God bless him with Howard Finkel, on occasion that has been the case. But at the same time, Finkel's the longest-running employee in the company, and everybody likes Fink. It's not a humiliating. It's entertainment. It's the manager getting a cake in the face.
I don't know if Kevin Kelly had picked his nose on the air a couple of weeks ago.
Well, now, I'm not saying it's always good entertainment. I'm not saying that everybody always has the greatest idea. I didn't see that particular thing, but, I don't believe that they ever humiliated me with anything I did because, like the time where I was backstage, I can't remember what, and Vince is in the wheelchair, and Vince the door opens, I'll throw the door open and whack Vince. Now I get the opportunity to do my old, heel manager thing, or whoa, humana, sorry boss, and he gets the chance to yell at me and send me running off, and it was a piece of business in the break. That's part of the show, and it can't all be death and destruction and famine and pestilence and plague. But, unfortunately, that's why that we do wrestling instead of Saturday Night Live, because there's a lot better wrestling writers in the WWF than there is comedy writers. So sometimes the comedy don't go too well. But Gorilla was never in a position to do something like that because it just wouldn't have worked. Gorilla didn't have the personality, didn't have the demeanor. He's a huge guy. He was a great ex-wrestler. He was well fed. You don't want to see that guy wearing a tutu. But, for Harvey Whippleman, yeah. Stick his face in the cake. What the heck?
Well, I mean, even like Jim Ross, though. I mean, no one wanted to see Jim Ross as the crazy postal worker.
Well, see, once again, and everybody knew
Russo.
that. Everybody knew that Vince Russo. See, Russo didn't care. That was one of the things. Russo didn't care whether it was what the people wanted to see or not. Russo wanted to make a buffoon of Jim Ross because Jim Ross was the one likely to be able to tell Vince that Russo was full of crap. So he wanted to diminish his standing in every way he could, and it was a personal thing that was taken too far, that was put on the air, and Russo would have hammered it until the dogs came home. But everybody, including Vince McMahon, saw that no, the people aren't accepting Jim Ross as a crazy heel. They still respect him. They know he's good at what he does. So we're not going to go on with this, and it became erased from history. Okay, that was something that Russo sold as an angle, but in actuality was doing on his own personal time to make Jim Ross look like a buffoon. Guess what? Didn't work.
The first time...
I thought I was listening to Art Bell.
The first time that I heard that song on a wrestling show, Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, was that Randy Savage's entrance music in ICW?
Not really, but kind of, sort of. That was the opening theme music for the
opening
ICW
theme
of
the old ICW TV, because I remember that song, like, even though I remember when I hear that song, and I remember the movie Midnight Express from many, many years ago, and I remember, your Midnight Express, what flashed into my head was Randy Savage, like, 25 years ago, or it wasn't quite that long ago, about 22, 23 years ago,
yeah.
When I was, and doing all those crazy things, watching on TV, going like, how does he do that? Because I never saw a wrestler do that stuff in those days.
And this is something that nobody wants to know, but I'll say it anyway, but I'll try to be brief. The movie came out in '78, and the ICW television show started production in '79, and they were using that. It was fairly new at the time, and then the Midnight Express of Dennis Condrey, Randy Rose, and Norvell Austin, the original version, used the old BT Express, Here Comes the Express disco song. And when Bobby Eaton and Dennis Condrey and I got together in Louisiana, they asked me, well, let's find some music. And I said, how about we not use the disco of the BT Express song, and let's use this, because I was a fan of the movie and the ICW television show. And that's how it stuck. And now, to this day, whenever anybody wants to get a tickle out of me, they'll play that song.
Now, I don't know if you have the time for this, but we've had a couple of emails on this one already. Any interest in writing a book?
I was just talking to Scott Teal last week, and Scott had suggested, hey, you ought to do that. I write a book every week when I write our television. I would like to, which it would be an endless rambling series of old stories that maybe somebody could collate into some type of readable form, but, I don't have time because I'm still doing, kind of what I'm doing here, and I don't think I would have time to do justice to it. There's still Smoky Mountain Wrestling videotapes I'd like to produce, for heaven's sake. I haven't done that yet.
Tell us everybody about Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin, because we hear about those names all the time.
Once again, they are two guys who are going to be phenomenal, and they're great as a team because they each have strengths and they each have a couple of weaknesses. Shelton is probably one of the most natural athletes and natural wrestlers that Danny Davis has ever trained or that I've ever seen. He picks up on things one or two. I mean, Bobby Eaton came up for a special class week before last and showed Shelton his knee drop off the top, and Shelton was doing it pretty well on a crash dummy after 2 tries. Not saying I'd want to be the human being to lay there until he, really nails it perfect, but Shelton is a great wrestler, natural wrestler, and picks things up. Brock, on the other hand, has not been training as long as Shelton. He came in later, but he has the look, he has the size, and he has the personality, the charisma just to look at him. And also, at 300 pounds and hard as a rock, the guy did a shooting star press at the Gardens, which blew the roof off the place. He is greener in terms of his execution than Shelton is, but he has so much fire that, you know, they pick each other up, and they're going to be a great tag team here for us in OVW. They already are. They're the Southern Tag Team Champions, and I think eventually one or both will be in their own spot in the WWF. They've both really been great guys to work with.
Is there anybody new since Eric Angle came in? Anybody else new that's come in? Who's the DiNucci guy?
Actually, the poor kid's name, as I later found out, is Danny DeLucci. He's a friend of Bobby Eaton's from North Carolina that came over to spend some time in Memphis with him, and he rode up with Bobby Eaton and Randy Hales to come to our television taping. Randy gave me the name wrong, and so I wrote it down that way, and actually, when I found out that wasn't really his name, I said, heck, let's go with DiNucci anyway, because it gave me a chance to say Brian Hildebrand's name on my TV show. I said, you know, I wonder if Danny DiNucci is the grandson of the legendary Dom DiNucci that trained great pro wrestlers like Cactus Jack, Brian Hildebrand, and Troy Orndorff.
What? Why did you say Troy Orndorff?
Just because. Do you remember who Troy Orndorff was?
Oh yeah, of course, it's Shane Douglas.
Yeah, well, I just liked saying that name too. It was a rib. It was just a chance for me to say some.
Oh, I knew it was, but. Let's go to Chris.
Danny was just in for the one time right now. Although he's a good young kid too, and I wouldn't mind seeing him back.
Let's go to Chris in New Jersey. Chris, what's going on?
Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Doing great.
I have a question for Jim. You used to have the Smoky Mountain Fan Weeks back when you ran Smoky Mountain. I was just wondering if there was ever any chance of you doing something like that in OVW.
Right now, because of the way that our schedule and our territory is laid out, see, in Smoky Mountain, we could have big events on 3 or 4 consecutive days, like Johnson City, Knoxville, Barberville, Kentucky, or over, wherever it may be, and really put together a heck of a week for the fans. Right now, we just run the metropolitan Louisville area, and if we have a garden show, generally all focus is on that because our talent pool as a whole is a little bit less experienced, and I want them to focus on the big show or focus on television. So right now we don't have a string of events in a row that we could put together to keep the people busy, but I'd like to probably, I would say within the next, before wintertime, I'd like to do a special weekend, maybe even something this summer. And then once again, a lot of our Louisville Gardens, the big events there are on weekdays because the WWF crew is busy on weekends. So it's scheduling right now, but I'd like to do some kind of get-together, maybe even for a weekend for the folks, if we can put it on the schedule.
Oh. Now, as far as Louisville goes, when's the next show in Louisville, and do you have, any people that are confirmed coming in for that one?
Well, obviously, we have a show every week in Louisville.
The next big garden show.
But the next Louisville Gardens event will be Wednesday night, April the 4th, and it's going to be a good card. Talking to some people right now, we probably have 1 or 2 WWF names, but we are shooting for another big show such as Rock and Rumble and Christmas Chaos is going to take place in late June. And that'll be co-promoted with the 100.5 The Fox here, the big radio station coverage, and have some major WWF names on it. We're going to try to either sell out the Gardens or, heck, maybe even go to a bigger place. You never know.
Really?
There's another venue that we have had tentative talks at looking at, and it's not as well known in terms of location as the Gardens and in terms of the wrestling history, but it seats a few more people. And we might have to do that if what I've got planned for June comes off, because we filled up the Gardens with what we had for January.
So you really got some plans then?
Well, you know me, Dave. I gotta stress on stuff. I gotta think about stuff, or else I'm not happy. When I first came to OVW, I said that we would do our first, and this same way I approached Knoxville, and I was off on my time in Knoxville, unfortunately, to the latter, but I've been off on my schedule here to the good. I said that we would do our first $20,000 house in a year, and we would sell out the Gardens in 2 years. Well, we did our first $30,000 house in a year, and we sold out the Gardens in a year and a half. So
you also had Steve Austin.
Schedule so far.
You also had Steve Austin.
We sold it. I didn't say we weren't going to have a draw to sell it out, but we sold it.
I mean, if you had Steve Austin, if there was a Steve Austin, you had him in Knoxville, you probably would have beaten your time frame.
But you know what? Here's the thing. In Knoxville, and God bless all these folks, but we brought in Rick and Scott Steiner. We brought in the Big Boss Man when he was pretty hot in the WWF. Steiner's had just been the WWF Tag Team Champions. We had the Funk Brothers. I could go on with the Road Warrior Hawk, and the biggest house of the first year and 9 months of our existence was me against Bob Armstrong in a lumberjack match. We beat the Steiners by $10,000 in the same building. So Knoxville, it was a whole different type of animal.
But none of them were Steve Austin.
Oh, sure. No, I'm not saying that. You know, I'm saying that you have to go with what's hot, and you have to go with what the particular territory will buy. And this used to be the same kind of territory here. I remember one time in Lexington, Kentucky, when Jerry Jarrett was promoting and doing 6,000 or 7,000, sometimes 8,000 people every show in Lexington. He brought in Nick Bockwinkel to defend the AWA title against Jerry Lawler, and Superstar Billy Graham to defend the CWA title against Bill Dundee, and drew 5,000 people. Came back the next month with Jerry Lawler against Jackie Fargo in the main event and drew 8,000. They didn't want to see the stars, they wanted to see the issue. Well, now they want to see stars. But 5 years ago in Knoxville, or 20 years ago here, they want to see issues. You have to make sure you keep a pulse on that, because you can break yourself bringing in stars if they want to see issues, and you can go bankrupt trying to get in issues if they want to see stars.
You know, there's something that's really interesting. When you brought up Lexington, now were you, I'm trying to get the time right, you would have been for sure, okay, now you probably would have been Mid-South when Savage came back, and they settled their feud. Were you Mid-South by then?
I was South at the time.
Okay, because but you were in the Memphis territory when the feud was going on, right?
Oh yeah, it was a 4-year build.
Yeah.
See, basically what happened was Randy Savage obviously was the son of Angelo Poffo, so was Leap and Lanny Poffo. They, for a number of reasons, for disputes they'd had with promoters, etc., were basically unemployable in the wrestling business. Nobody wanted to book these guys, and especially nobody wanted to book Randy, because he was a great talent. He could go out and get over better than most people, but he was also unpredictable, and you know, you never knew what they were going to do. So they joined up when Bob Orton Jr., Ronnie Garvin, Professor Boris Malenko, Bob Roop, and a couple other people split off from the Fullers in Knoxville and started their own promotion. The Poffos joined with them, and all of a sudden you had an independent promotion that was being run on a shoestring that was drawing decent spot show crowds in the hills of eastern Kentucky and the wilds of West Virginia, that had like one of the greatest array of workers on their talent roster that anybody had ever seen. But they were all people who were basically, I don't want to use the term blackballed, but basically nobody wanted to use them because of their unreliability, the fact they'd run opposition, or they walked out, you know, whatever the case may be. And so for a while they had a tremendous crew of talent, but they couldn't make it go because the business heads weren't, the promotion wasn't in the right frame. The workers were tremendous in the ring, but they weren't right business wise. So at any rate, people slowly started trickling away. Bob Orton Jr. had another great run in Louisiana and then went to the WWF. Blah blah blah. But they always challenged Jarrett and all of his top guys, which were Jerry Lawler, Bill Dundee, etc. And finally, after 4 years, when ICW was about to go out of business and everybody had left except the Poffos, they made the phone call, made a deal, got back together because business is business, and Randy Savage and Jerry Lawler main evented every town in Jarrett's territory and did huge houses, especially in Lexington, because the television had been running there for 4 years with Savage saying he'd kill Lawler if he ever got hold of him.
The one thing that, because Lance Russell was on the show, and he was mentioning that they went up there, him and Dave Brown, I think, went up to a Lexington trip, and this is when the feud was probably at its hottest, and he was talking about how the wrestlers were carrying guns. Oh,
well, no doubt about it. I mean, the ICW guys would be in the parking lot behind Rupp Arena. Sometimes they'd buy ringside tickets until they smartened up to that and management got them thrown out. And, of course, there was a time where Savage waylaid Bill Dundee in the parking lot of a gym in Nashville. He had one of the girl wrestlers, and I won't call anybody's name because I can't remember who it was, but sit outside and watch. And when Dundee came out, Savage and a couple other of the ICW guys came up to him, and Dundee saw him coming. He was outnumbered, tried to get in his car to get in his bag, but they caught him before he could get in there and nailed him with some nuts and broke his jaw. So Dundee was out for about 3 months because he had to have some type of surgery on the jawline fracture. It was a serious deal.
Let's see.
That's the way business was back then. It was fun.
Let's go to Star in Seattle. Star, what's going on?
Hey, Jim.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Me and my boyfriend last night were watching your Fan Week videotapes from 94, 95.
Yes.
And, They're really great. I was wondering if you got a chance to beat the living shit out of Mark Madden.
No, actually, I never have, and actually, I also didn't know you could say that word on Dave's show, but if you can, he is a shithead. And, you know, actually, I wouldn't try to do that because beating the shit out of him, I'll say it again, would take all day. I'd rather beat his brains out because that'd only be a 2-minute job. But no, unfortunately, the only time that I've ever been in the same building with him since then was at the tribute show that they did for Brian Hildebrand in his hometown shortly before he passed away, and I didn't know that Madden was even going to be there until the night before, and there were discussions as to whether I should go home because I didn't want to cause an incident. And finally, they agreed to keep him upstairs, and I agreed to stay downstairs, and never the twain met. And that was not the venue for it. But at any other point, if I was ever in the same building, I don't care whether he's got a lawyer or not. He can sue me. He can stand in line. I will, if I ever get the chance to see him, do my dead level best to beat the snot out of him.
Damn right. Do you still go to Dairy Queen?
Yeah, there's Dairy Queen right down the street, and you know what? They get my order right every time.
Right on. That was great, though. That was great with that video tape.
You know, I've been thinking, so many people have asked about the Dairy Queen thing. I'm thinking we should sell that tape on the website. I could probably make more money than selling the OVW television shows.
Now, is that the one with Lance Storm and everybody?
Well, actually, it was...
it was the J.R. Benson one, right?
Yeah, J.R. Benson shot it. It was me, J.R. Benson, Ron Hill, Chris Jericho, Brian Hildebrand, Jimmy Del Rey, and a couple of other people in a van coming back from a show one night. And the show hadn't done real well, so I was a little testy anyway. But
and then
maybe I'll put that on the website. I can have the exclusive copyright on that.
That'd be great. Yeah, me and my boyfriend think you're like one of the greatest men to walk in wrestling. We have a lot of respect for you and what you do. So.
Well, thank you very much, Star. I appreciate it.
Yeah. What's the name of the man that does this interview?
Me? Dave Meltzer.
Oh, sorry. I always forget the name of people who suck.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's go to Tom. Tom, what's up?
You ain't gonna rerun this show, are you, Dave?
This is like the archives, like the Disciples of Sin.
Yeah, that's right.
One of Dave's favorite shows.
Dave, I take exception to what she just said. I'm a big fan of yours.
Oh, that's okay.
So you're the one.
Yeah. You were talking about Macho Man's music earlier before. I recall it. I think it was Fame back in the early days of Memphis. He came out with Fame.
Actually,
and ICW came out to Fame.
ICW also, now that you've come to mention it, it sure was.
Yeah. Question for you, Mr. Cornette.
Yes, sir.
Your opinion on the stories behind what happened between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart back in Montreal in Survivor Series. Who do you believe? Do you believe Shawn Michaels had nothing to do with the incident? Do you think he's hiding something?
Well, I think we did a part of a whole show on this one time before, but we talked about it at the top of the program. And, I don't think it's worth going through a bunch yet, but to answer your question, no, Shawn obviously, clearly, to anybody that knows him, did not have any knowledge of what was going to go on before he went in the ring.
Okay. And also, I just heard you mention Jimmy Del Rey. Where is he today?
Jimmy still lives in Florida. He's done some managing for some local promotions down there. He had been in the wrestling business for quite a while before he became a Heavenly Body, and he had some injuries stack up on him, and he has had, I don't want to say replacements on everything, but he's had hip surgery, which I think he did have a hip replacement. Either that or it was a knee, but he's had surgery on his knee, his hip, his shoulder, and the last time that I saw him was at Brian Hildebrand's wake the night before his funeral, and, he was using a cane at that point. He is still involved, as I said, managing and around wrestling, but the injury stacked up on him to the point where he's not in the ring anymore, and it's a shame because he was really a good performer.
Great performer. I love the Heavenly Bodies tag team. Another blast from the past, or really not so much so the past, but Mark Merrow, who did he piss off? I thought he was a great talent. I thought coming to WWF, winning the IC belt, I didn't think they gave him a fair shake, and then when he came back with that boxing gimmick, they sort of toned down his wrestling.
Well,
and I thought they killed him. What happened?
The worst thing was his selection of marriage partners. Basically his wife overshadowed him, as basically I saw it coming, to be honest, when they first put him together, because who wants to look at him when they can look at her? And then once that, Vince was able somehow, and this is why I think that Vince is the reincarnation of Merlin the Magician, he was able to take her and get her over despite her lack of any discernible talent whatsoever. Merrill became the guy that carried her bag around and was called Mr. Sable. And, once that his 120-pound wife power bombed him on live pay-per-view, that was about the end of Mark Merrill.
That was the end.
But that was, hey, the family made money, but that's a classic.
Do you remember when that happened? We all said that was the end, and I remember Vince Russo writing this thing about how, it's the beginning, and we're going to turn him around, and we're going to do this and this, and Mark Merrow, is going to be a bigger star than ever because he took that power bomb. And
yeah, they turned him around all right and turned him out the door, and and it was by demand of the fans because I'm sorry, but you can't insult people's intelligence. And how are they going to buy anybody being a threat to Steve Austin or, for that matter, the Brooklyn Brawler if their 120-pound, totally inept physically wife can powerbomb them on national television? That's pretty well a sign that you need to go home and collect stamps.
And that killed him so bad he couldn't even go to WCW?
He could go if he wanted to.
A, why would they want him? And B, why would he want them? She made so much money off of standing around, showing off her surgeries that I don't think they need to work.
Okay. Well, thank you very much,
Just
gentlemen.
being honest. Of course, I try to sugarcoat things, but,
We what was it? What was the independent that we heard, what's the name, Earthquake was doing?
Oh, yeah.
Tensa.
It was,
yeah, we heard that Mark and Rena Merrow's name were mentioned as maybe appearing on a show in Central Florida.
Wow.
And that Mark has been training at John Tensa's gym.
Well, maybe they're looking to get out of the house.
Hey, Jim, I got to ask you, before Big Show left, what was his weight?
Okay, and let me put this controversy to rest now. The man's never going to be a skeleton, but Danny Davis personally would supervise his weigh-ins every Friday, and 2 weeks before the Garden Show, which was January 31st, Big Show weighed in at 414 in front of Danny Davis, who does not lie and who has no reason to. I personally, it's hard for me to tell because I was around Show all the time from the time he came in. He was a lot smaller when he went back to the WWF than he was when he got here. I don't know what the controversy was because 414 pounds is probably still more than he ought to weigh, and I'm not saying that he's got the cardio to give Benoit a run for his money, but he did lose the weight. Now, we didn't weigh him for the 2 weeks in between the last weigh-in and the Garden Show, which was his last day here, and I don't know whether he went home and had a big picnic or not, but I know that 2 weeks before January 31st, his weigh-in was 414.
And how's Mark Henry doing?
Mark Henry is doing phenomenal. Mark Henry weighs 322 pounds now. He signed his contract at 415. And Mark he looks like a different human being. He's still working on, he was rushed into the business, and he didn't get all the basics that he should have, and he's sort of, having his career run in reverse now, and that he's learning things he should have already known, and he's already done things that he should yet to be doing. But he has worked hard since he's been here. He's popular in the locker room. He's lost, I think he came here at 380-something. He's lost that weight. He looks like a different human being. He's doing leapfrogs and monkey flips. Now they've got to find a spot for him. But I believe when you see Mark Henry back in the WWF, he'll weigh probably in the neighborhood of 310 pounds, and he'll be doing a lot of things that he could never do before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to try to sell people that Mark Henry is the next coming to Ric Flair, but I'm going to say that Mark Henry is now better than anybody ever thought he was going to be in this business, and he's worked very hard at it.
Cool.
What's the status of Leviathan right now?
Leviathan partially tore, depending on the doctor you want to listen to, an ankle ligament several weeks ago, and he's just about ready to come back.
Okay.
So he did just a misfortunate accident, wasn't anybody's fault.
Was that before or after the show?
Oh, that was after. That was, as a matter of fact, about a week or 10 days after the Garden Show.
Now,
I'm sorry.
I haven't talked to you. Okay, I haven't talked to you about this, but that show, of course, was supposed to take place in December, and then you had the snowstorm and everything, and you had to move everything back. How is it? Because I know the way you book, and you book far in advance, and your angles peak at a certain time. And I mean, granted, with the WWF guys, they were involved in transitions for your guys and angles, but they were involved. And obviously, you had to put stuff on hold for 6 weeks, and you had to change stuff. And,
I was not a pleasant person to live with. I was stalking around the house a lot, pulling at my hair, and I kicked several small dogs. But we made it work somehow. It's hard to peak for the greatest matches anybody has ever seen on December 13th, and then tell them, well, you know what? We're going to have them 7 weeks from now. Hold on right there. But we did the best we could and made it work, and the show came off well. And I apologize for not getting a tape of the raw footage out to you, but we're finishing up the production on the home video now at ovwrestling.com, where you can place your orders. And I will make sure you get one, Dave, so you can see what we were talking about.
Was there a reason that you chose to postpone it 7 weeks? Was it just because that
was their schedule, not yours, right?
Well, a combination. See, you got to think. We got to obviously OVW schedule for something like that's easy to work with, but we got to have an open date in the building, and we've got to have an open date where all those WWF stars can come back.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, being as it was still the dead of the winter, we didn't want them to be in Portland, Oregon one night and then have to come to Louisville on January 31st.
You don't have to worry about them being in Portland, Oregon.
Well, what I mean. The West Coast or some far-flung place. So it worked out that in January, the schedule, they were in Columbus, Ohio the night before for SmackDown. The Gardens was open on the 31st, and we could do it. So that's the way that came to be. It was, it was just getting all the pieces in place again.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else as far as guys that you're really seeing turn the corner, as far as guys or guys that you have that do not have WWF deals that you want to get WWF deals?
Fortunately, with the exception, and we talked about Jason Lee and Derek King as a team earlier, who I think are so entertaining and do deserve to have a spot somewhere, maybe not as World Tag Team Champions, but somewhere. Also a guy who works for us, a couple of guys who work for us, Sean Casey and Chris Michaels, are good young talents that once again, maybe they don't have the size to be the world heavyweight champion, but they do deserve to make money in this business. Almost everybody else here, and I can mention Damien also, obviously the Disciples of Sin, because right now I don't think it's any secret, Payne has a deal and Damien doesn't yet. But, like I said, that was the match that tore the house down at the Gardens. Damien, Payne, and Sin against Matt and Jeff Hardy and Lita, and obviously the Hardys and Lita being over didn't hurt it, but Payne and Damien and Sin stepped up and carried their end of things, and they're a good tag team, and I think Damien ought to be in the running or the contention. A guy who gives his heart and soul every time out is Trailer Park Trash, and Trash, of course, is blessed with having the absolute worst body in the history of genetics. But he fits his gimmick, and he's a great worker. But, I don't think he, without cosmetic surgery, has the look they're looking for.
Oh, no.
Most everybody else here right now has a developmental deal, but I can tell you that as far as our homegrown talent, the guys that started with OVW and trained here, Rob Conway, the Damager, Nick Dinsmore, and Flash, unfortunately, fortunately for them, unfortunately maybe for other folks, whether they have the big contracts or whether they won the NCAA title or whether they play pro football or not, those are still the go-to guys in this territory because they started with wrestling, they concentrate on wrestling, and that's what they do, and they do it very well. And I think those guys sooner or later, despite the fact that they may not be, giants or they may not have, these mainstream sports credentials, they're going to be up there because they have just knocked themselves out to do it the right way. I can't really fault any of the guys we've got here right now because even down to the Eric Angles and Brian Keck, who was an alternate on the U.S. Olympic wrestling team and has only been here a few months and had never really studied wrestling before. Even the guys who come here who don't have any background in pro wrestling, they try their best and they try to adapt and they try to get in there and they bust their ass. And I can't fault hard work. So it remains to be seen whether any of those guys are going to become great talents in this business or not, but as long as they try and they give it their effort, then I think they should have a shot and they should be at least given an open mind.
What about David Nelson?
David Nelson, mind is closed. David Nelson is no longer on a developmental deal. David did not have the attitude to get along with the other boys, and David did not have the attitude to realize that he was starting from scratch in a business he didn't know much about, and he needed to open his eyes and open his ears and close his mouth. And that's what David Nelson's problem was. And unfortunately, you can't exactly hold a guy up who most people have never met as a role model. But if I could, I would say to any guy who wants to get a deal with the WWF or anywhere else, whether it be in Memphis or even WCW, whatever, I don't care what you've done in any other business. I don't care how big you are, how strong you are, how tough you are, or how smart you are. If you don't know anything about professional wrestling, it's a whole new ball game and it's a different business. And if you just can place some trust in the people that are training you and open your ears and close your mouth and learn and respect it and do your best and get along with the other boys because you're no better than they are, that's the best thing you can do. And guys who have not done that in the past are the guys who went away and you didn't hear anything more about them.
Have we talked about the Tough Enough videos yet?
We've
never talked about Tough Enough, no.
Did you ever see any of those promos on Raw?
I did a couple, yeah, and now I understand why, the wrestling business is so tough, because evidently if that's the way that most people do it, then it's awful hard to do. I'm not really familiar with the entire concept of what they're going to do. I'm ambivalent in my feelings about the idea of airing the videotapes from, regular folk, because that tends to look a little cheesy in my opinion. And if they find somebody that they think that they can train to be a wrestler, God bless them, but it ain't a 3-month course. It's not this business isn't a 5-year course. Ric Flair, I'm sure, will admit to you that he learns something almost every time he gets in the ring of any significance. It's something you continue to learn, and you've got to have an aptitude for it to begin with. And anytime somebody thinks they're going to train to be a wrestler and start from scratch, and in 6 months they're great, well, they're either great, they're Kurt Angle, or they're crazy. Because they just don't have it.
That was the exception. Well, with David Nelson, now, did he have a problem mentally, of course, in losing matches to smaller guys? Because I just remember watching him on your tapes.
Yeah, he
would walk in the ring, and I could tell he was going to do a job, and because he had that attitude, and it was like it was one of those guys, kind of like with Luger with Palumbo a couple weeks ago, where it's like he would lose matches, but he would do it in such an uninspired way that the guy who beat him didn't even get over.
Well, exactly, and a lot of the veterans have perfected that art to where they can do it on purpose, but David didn't know how to do it. He was just doing it by accident, because, but that wasn't even his biggest problem. He had a real problem just being one of the boys, and he had several conflicts with several of the guys here, all of them the blame pretty well placed on David Nelson. I'm not trying to slander the guy when he's gone. I've told him this sometimes to his face. The next promo you cut, you'll be cutting it at home because we're going to send you home. And then finally, the time came. He thought that he was above the status of a lowly developmental wrestler in this business after training for 6 weeks. He was very wrapped up in himself, and he didn't have the right attitude, and he didn't deal with authority well. He didn't deal with the other boys well. And athletically and physically, he had every gift in the world that you'd want to, where he could have had several, 6-figure years in this business. But mentally, he thought he was a little bit too good for it, to be starting from scratch.
Now, did they send him to Memphis, or what did you call him?
They were going to send him to Memphis, but he suddenly realized on Tuesday that he had injured his knee on Thursday when he found out that he was going to have to drive 800 miles round trip to Memphis and back, and also to put Leviathan over on television. So he decided to have his knee scoped, and that was probably a great decision on his part, because that gave everybody a chance to say, well, you know what, we'll rethink this and go our separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
We are totally out of time. Jim, I want to thank you very much for doing the show. And, of course, Jim's got Ohio Valley Wrestling, OVWrestling.com.
Thank you, Dave.
You're very welcome. And I tell you, if you were a fan of Mid-South Wrestling, I always tell this to people. I go, if you want to see Mid-South Wrestling, there's no Ted DiBiase's there, but there's a lot of guys who are there are a lot of guys who are training, and a half a dozen guys or so or more who are going to end up being stars in the business, and you want to see them basically before anyone else sees them. Those are good tapes to get. I mean, I enjoy them. What I like about them the most is that whenever I watch them, I never get annoyed, ever, at any of the angles. I never feel insulted. Sometimes the angles don't look particularly good, but the intent is there.
Hey, that's the best compliment I could ask for. You know what? Even though you could be the greatest chef in the world, but sometimes the cake just doesn't rise.
But no, I love the commentary and the storylines and the logic and the fact that wins and losses somehow play something instead of just being ignored the minute after the match is over.
If you're having a race and you don't have a finish line or a goal, then nobody cares how fast you run or where you're going.
Yeah, I mean sometimes when we talk about all the stuff that we talk about on the show, Jim Cornette kind of books in that same way, so it's real fun for me to watch it. Anyway. Want to thank everyone for joining in. This was an entertaining show, as usual, with Jim Cornette, and we will be back tomorrow at 5.